Why did President Biden's approval ratings crash in August of 2021? From a popular new president to quite unpopular in only 2 months. How did that happen? Why did that happen? This is an aggregation of polling data from 538, a popular polling site. This includes Gallup and many other polls. We can see that President Biden started looking good here with a high approval rating, which continued to decline slightly through about July and August, and suddenly dropped dramatically in just a couple of months. It has continued to decline since then, but what the actual approval ratings data shows is a very dramatic drop in just a couple of months in July and August of 2021. News reports often now admit that this happened. They're often vague or can't really explain it. They often point to the economy, inflation, other factors like that. I'll discuss the most probable reason next. Unemployment seems very unlikely, as it was according to official figures, which should be taken with a grain of salt. But according to official figures, unemployment rate was pretty steadily declining since President Biden was inaugurated. There's no dramatic spike or increase in July or August. You see everything looking good. According to this, things getting better. Inflation is a little bit more difficult. It's worth remembering that inflation was significantly lower in July and August. It has been increasing over the last, since the inauguration, but it doesn't really show any kind of big spike or dramatic change around the time of Biden's crash. As you can see here, in fact, the official figures are showing a slight decrease in the inflation rate at that time. Probably not the explanation either. So the economic explanation doesn't really hold up. It's obviously unlikely. What did happen in July and August of 2021? Something else was a big story at the time. This is when the disappointing performance of the COVID vaccines became clear, and the official narrative clearly changed dramatically from claims of herd immunity that the vaccines would prevent infection and transmission to claims that they dramatically reduce hospitalization and death. So let's take a look at what happened. On Wednesday, July 21st, 2021, Biden made very exaggerated and false claims in a CNN town hall primetime video event. He was fact-checked even by CNN for the inaccuracy of these claims at the time. This was one of many such statements, both by Biden, his spokesperson Jen Psaki, and a number of others in the preceding months, touting the vaccines very heavily, that they would work really great, prevent infection and transmission, prevent hospitalization and death. 1 week later, on July 27th, 2021, widespread reporting of a massive COVID outbreak over the 4th of July weekend in Provincetown, a seaside community in Cape Cod in Massachusetts, heavily vaccinated state. According to official figures, about 80% of adults vaccinated, so higher than the national average. Nonetheless, there was an outbreak. A large number of people were diagnosed with COVID-19. 5 of them were hospitalized. Significantly, if you look at the data the CDC published about this particular incident, there's no indication that the vaccines worked. Of the people who were hospitalized, 4 out of the 5 were vaccinated. Similarly, of the people infected, about 80% were vaccinated. The time evolution of the cases doesn't show any indication that the vaccines were working at all. Now, the many headlines, many political figures like the governor of Massachusetts made false statements that the Cape Cod outbreak somehow showed the vaccines worked. Certainly this data for this particular incident did not show that. Now we can see that the dramatic drop occurs right during this period of time. Matters got worse. Let me first discuss the vaccination rate for the population, and especially the vulnerable population at high risk of dying from COVID, according to the CDC on July 31st, 2021. This is right before the August Delta wave, which I'll discuss in more detail in a moment. The CDC at that time claimed that just over 60% of the adult population was fully vaccinated, which at the time meant 2 shots at least 14 days ago, so giving sufficient time, supposedly, for the vaccines to work. And population over 65, about 80% of the population were fully vaccinated. Again, that means both shots at least 2 weeks since the last shot. The vaccine is supposed to be working. Biden overpromised. He made dramatic statements like, if you're vaccinated, you're not going to be hospitalized, you're not going to be in the ICU unit, and you're not going to die. These were so extreme that even CNN and many others fact-checked them on July 22nd. So this is even before the Provincetown outbreak was widely reported. And August brought much worse news than just the Provincetown case, with 80% of adults over 65 allegedly fully vaccinated on July 31st. Keep in mind, 75% of COVID deaths are 65 and over, 95% of COVID deaths are 50 and over, probably around 70%, if you believe the official figures, probably around 70% of people over 50 and above were fully vaccinated in August. Now, these are the FluView website from the CDC. This shows the number and percentage of deaths attributed to COVID-19. That's the blue shaded area, and all is the red. You can see there was a large peak before the vaccinations were in widespread use during the winter of 2020 to 2021. However, we then get two peaks, and the August one is probably most significant for the crash in Biden's popularity. Let's see what happens here. Lots of people die, according to the official figures, in August. And it's followed by the wave in December, January, the Omicron wave, where many more die. Or if you look at the area underneath these two peaks, you'll see that it's about the same as here. There's no indication that the vaccines are working in these figures, as presented here by the CDC. In other contexts, they do claim dramatic improvements, reductions in hospitalizations and deaths, but it's not visible here. Keep in mind, you would generally expect, with 80% of people who are at high risk, the elderly, vaccinated, you'd expect these peaks to be largely in the unvaccinated and to be 20 to at most maybe 30% of the size of the peak here. That's not what you see. It's doubly remarkable because the previous peak would be expected to kill, sadly, many vulnerable people, so they're no longer around to die here. Secondly, there would be natural immunity even before the vaccines. One would be expecting these peaks for the Delta wave and the Omicron wave to be substantially smaller if the vaccines dramatically reduced hospitalizations and deaths. Not by a few percent, but really reduced them the way the government claimed at the time and has continued to claim. That's not what you see. Let's be clear, you can almost always find some acrobatic, bizarre scenario to explain something like this, that how you could possibly have the vaccines dramatically reduce hospitalizations and deaths, and yet somehow get these large peaks. However, it's very unlikely, and the common sense interpretation that this shows widespread failure of the vaccines and under-delivery of Biden's statements and promises, he and his staff and the government, is the natural and logical correct response to this. Hence, his approval ratings crashed dramatically due to overpromising and under-delivering. How to do better. How to get good approval ratings that you deserve even in difficult times. And we've seen very confident statements made by President Biden and also sort of self-appointed experts like Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum during this crisis that have repeatedly proven to be false, to not happen. Doesn't seem to produce any humility or contrition or reevaluation of their thought process. Let me close with the first sentence from President Thomas Jefferson's inaugural address in 1801. Friends and fellow citizens, called upon to undertake the duties of the first executive office of our country, I avail myself of the presence of that portion of my fellow citizens which is here assembled to express my grateful thanks for the favor with which they have been pleased to look towards me, to declare a sincere consciousness that the task is above my talents, and that I approach it with those anxious and awful presentiments which the greatness of the charge and the weakness of my powers so justly inspire. He goes on in this vein in the address extensively. He apologizes in advance for the large mistakes that he expects to make. And it is significant to remember, what was he engaged upon? A recreation of a functioning partial democracy after thousands of years of failure. An attempt to resurrect what had failed in Athens and in Rome close to 2,000 years before. So he understood this is a really difficult thing, and he and his colleagues were in over their heads trying to do something very difficult. In the current crisis, we don't see that humility, that under-promising and over-delivering in our elected officials or in our self-appointed experts such as Bill Gates and Klaus Schwab. Quite the opposite. We see an unwarranted overconfidence, if not extreme arrogance. The recommendation is straightforward. Some humility and under-promise, over-deliver. That's how to get good approval ratings that you deserve. This concludes this video presentation. If you like this video, please click like. Please click subscribe and the notification bell if you would like to receive more content from us. You can avoid internet censorship by subscribing directly to our RSS news feed. Please consider sharing the link by email and on your website or blog, in addition to liking, upvoting, or sharing on increasingly censored, advertising beholden, big company social media. We have encountered such censorship. Mathematical software is developing algorithms and software to automate data analysis, reducing the risks of costly errors and increasing the predictive power of the results. You can support our work financially by subscribing on our Patreon page, https://www.patreon.com/mathsoft, or scanning the QR code in the lower right corner.